said build a bridge, must subtract the division. Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. Hardest days to be balanced, seen the world is so cold. Leaders barely being biblical, boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know, all praise to the chief. One and only high priest, son of God with the keys. Price of life ain't cheap, paid in blood not clean. Wanna cross over water, follow what he taught us, start walking. I'ma go build a bridge. Yeah, he said build a bridge. A lot of tensions on the sides, word be dividing truth from the fibs. Christ the light and it's lit, time to go build a bridge. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, 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 bold. Papa said build a bridge, must subtract the division. Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. Hardest days to be balanced, seen the world is so cold. Leaders barely being biblical, boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know, all praise to the chief. One and only high priest, son of God with the keys. Price of life ain't cheap, paid in blood not clean. Wanna cross over water, follow what he taught us, start walking. I'ma go build a bridge. Yeah, he said build a bridge. A lot of tensions on the sides, word be dividing truth from the fibs. Christ the light and it's lit, time to go build a bridge. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, keep it biblical for sure. Teach it balanced, preach it bold, 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 bold. Papa said build a bridge, must subtract the division. Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. All these days to be balanced, seen the world so cold. Leaders barely being biblical, boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know, all praise to the chief, one and only high priest.
Good evening, family. Welcome to The Bridge. I'm Jesse Bailey, and this is our special guest, Kimberly Arland, and we want to welcome you to a conversation about Black Lives Matter. We're going to be talking about this controversial organization and what it is that their message says, what their mission says, and then what is the mindset that is being developed during this time. So as many of you know who have been here before with us at The Bridge, our focus here is to make sure that we are building bridges between different thoughts, different cultures, but also ultimately we're building a bridge to the truth. And that's what we're searching for. We want to know what the truth is on all situations and circumstances so that we can come together and unite under that. And that is the goal, that we would be reconciled together, that we would unite under the truth and discover that and learn along the way. So in order for that to happen, we have 3 principles I just wanted to remind everybody of. Number 1, we keep it balanced. We want to keep a balanced perspective. In this world, it's easy to go on to an extreme side, but it takes core strength. If anybody's out there ever worked out, when you have to balance, it requires a core strength. So we want to strengthen our core, the very inner part of who we are through conversation and keeping it balanced and struggling to see things from the other person's perspective and the other side. Second, we want to be bold, not audacious or brass, but bold. Bold means that we speak the truth with all honesty, without fear of rejection or retaliation. So we create an environment where we can do that. And then third, we keep it biblical. For those of you who are watching who may not know me, I am a Christian and I have a biblical worldview. So everything that we talk about here is through those eyes, through that filter of the Bible and the Word of God. So if you don't agree with that worldview, we want you to watch, we want you to engage, and we want to hear from you and hear from your perspective as well, because we value that, because we believe that God gave you a mind to think and the ability to reason. So we want to celebrate that and open it up for everyone to share their thoughts and feelings. So we're trying to have an open conversation about the topics that we cover. So with that, that's enough from me. I want to, again, introduce a very talented and very intelligent guest, Kimberly Arland, who is joining us tonight for the conversation. Kimberly, welcome. Thank you so much. I just wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about yourself so the people that are watching can get to know you.
Okay. I'm Kimberly Arland, and my disclaimer is I am a female Christian Jesus lover, and I love conversation. I love people. I love conversation. I love learning. And I love sharing any little or large piece of what I may know and who I know, being Jesus. And as far as any experience I have experience being black, a lot.
I think that plays into our conversation well tonight.
That's my segue. And let's see. And that's enough. If you have any other questions, then you can call in. But we'll start with that.
Amen. Awesome. Well, so glad that you're joining us tonight. But we want to get right to it because I know there's a lot of people who have been asking me about Black Lives Matter, asking me about where I stand on that as a pastor, as someone who has a certain level of influence and platform in the community, and being a black man. People are waiting to hear what I have to say on this, and I'll be honest, I've been slow to speak on this and tried to be quick to listen, because I believe that truth is one thing, but timing with truth is wonderful. So I think the timing is right to begin to have the conversation about this topic. Yeah, timing's right for me.
Gotcha.
So, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people are critical of leadership, particularly within the church during crisis like this, saying, where are you? What are you saying? And, my message from the beginning is, I preach the gospel. I believe that is what helps the heart and helps these issues more than anything. But we also need to address the very real and practical issues that are coming up and answer the questions. So with that being said, we want to get to your questions tonight. So we're going to have a conversation, but it's not just between Kimberly and I. It's also between you who have decided to join in. So I want to give you the phone number to call into or to text if you have any questions. Now, the number's there on the screen. It's area code 818-835-4030. 818-835-4030. Now, this is the way we operate on the show, just so we can have as much order as possible. Don't call me, I'll call you. So if you would text in your question or text in your statement, we'll read that on the air. However, I would very much like the opportunity to have a conversation with some of you who are watching who may have a different perspective than myself or Kimberly on this particular topic. So again, feel free to call in. There's the number one more time, 818-835-4030. I just said call in, but I meant text in. If you guys didn't catch that, text in. And then what I'll do is I'll text you back and say, hey, would you mind jumping on the call? Or if you text in your question, just let me know that you'd be willing to jump in on the line with us and have a conversation. So with that, Black Lives Matter. Let's just start with the sentence itself.
Okay.
A lot of people have hashtag Black Lives Matter. They're marching in Black Lives Matter protests, and they're saying and shouting Black Lives Matter. It's kind of the rallying call for the social justice cause of equality for Black Americans right now. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you, Kimberly, is when you hear Black Lives Matter, what is the first thing that enters into your mind? What does that mean to you?
Well, I would have to go back 4 years. In 2016 is when I first heard about Black Lives Matter. Not about, but I heard the phrase.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. And I ended up writing about it because it spoke to me. I heard the phrase, didn't know even the context of the phrase, but I interpreted it a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And then I started to see the hashtag more and more. And it spoke to me for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because it's something I've wanted to shout in many situations I've been in.
Yeah.
The subtext and meaning of it to me personally was like a concise, intelligent way of saying what I've wanted to scream, but I hadn't been able to before knowing the context of hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So when I posted it 4 years ago, I got a lot of interesting feedback. And I didn't know why there was such a mixed response to hashtag Black Lives Matter. Because I know what I meant when I said, yes, of course, hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Mine does. All the Black lives I know do. You know? And so I looked into it and I thought, oh, okay, so there was context, generally speaking, with the majority of people that was mixed, but a lot of it was negative. So I found myself writing about it to explain what I and maybe other people innocently hashtagged. I explained what we might have meant, or what I did mean by saying it.
Yes.
I'll leave that at that. So that's what I thought at first.
Yes.
And you can go for it, and then we can go to 2020.
Yeah.
That
fast
was 4
forward to
years
2020.
ago. Yeah, because it may be different now, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I heard Black Lives Matter, the first thing I thought was, yes, absolutely. I mean, when you say the phrase Black Lives Matter, how can you disagree with that? How's there any question to that? Of course Black Lives Matter. And for me, just having a biblical worldview, they matter because Jesus says they matter. I mean, the color of our skin is part of the unique creativity of God. It's sacred. It's how he decided to make us. So for my life to matter to not just me, but to a group of people who are seeing that, it really said not just Black Lives Matter, but for me it said you matter.
Right.
And that was the power of that phrasing. when it says Black Lives Matter, it leaves it up to personal interpretation. And when you've been in a situation where you've been mistreated because you're black, to hear the term Black Lives Matter and people proclaiming that, you're able to internalize it and say, you know what, that's right, my life does matter. If you've ever been made to feel that your life doesn't matter because of the way you look or because of something that you have no control over, that's a very devaluing experience. But then to have someone come in and affirm that and reinforce the value that you have is powerful.
Yeah.
So I think there's no denying that it is a very powerful statement. And just with what it says, you can't disagree with that. No one would disagree with the statement that Black Lives Matter.
No one should.
No one should.
Yeah.
No one should disagree with that. And I think at the heart of it, most people don't disagree with that, unless, of course, we're talking about just stark racists who are really under the sway of the wicked one, because racism is evil. And if you are devaluing someone because of the way God made them, then you're actually going against God. So white supremacists, even black supremacists, anyone who devalues someone else because of the way they look, because of the way God made them, it's actually a disrespect to the Creator, not the one who had nothing to do with them being created.
And to clarify, this is kind of a statement and a question to you, is when I agree, and when I said that, I can only really say that to believers.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know before I knew the Lord so many things,
Yeah.
But as a believer, we have no excuse not to absolutely adore and love and treasure the multifaceted creation in the way He made every single person.
Yes.
How can we ever hate that? That hate is a hating part of who God is, because He created us out of His own self. That is a scary thought. To hate a group of people. It's scary.
It is. When you have that worldview. However, there's another worldview that is unfortunately widely accepted, and I'm going to talk about that next week. Next week we're going to talk about systemic racism. So there may be a little crossover. Kimberly wants to come back. We're going to talk about systemic racism and what it is, what it isn't. But when you have that worldview that appreciates all of God's creation, how can you get in a agreement with hating another people group? And really what it comes down to, and we talked about this in episode 1 when Ryan Williams was our guest, is that really the hatred of a group of people is more of a reflection of self-love and being selfish. Because if I only like black people because of the way I look, then really what I'm saying is I only like people who are like me, which in return you're saying I just like me. That's what it comes down to, is I like myself. And as a believer with that again that worldview, we believe that to be close to God is to deny self, is to deny the things that we want, and to embrace the things that are going to be beneficial to others. So it's not a self-hatred, it's a self-denial and a love for others. It's embracing others. So when you don't have that perspective, I can see how you can get into this really kind of primal, carnal, look out for yourself and everyone who's like you type of mentality. So that is a very primitive way of defining self and defining who you associate with.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to just the message, Black Lives Matter, I think that we can agree that unless you have a distinct hatred for black people as someone who maybe you had a bad experience, or maybe you were raised that way and you were taught certain things about the culture, that short of that, everyone should be in agreement that they do. But what changes is when that is spoken and there's a tone that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Because when I first heard it, I was like, yes. But then there was kind of a tone that began to settle in, and I think this is what people were speaking to when they were in opposition to it. At least, again, just talking face value, just on the surface here. Excuse me, I got an itch on my nose. But we're live and we're family.
So we're both doing it.
We're family. We're family. But I think the tone has something to do with it, because the chant "All Lives Matter" came shortly after, back in 2016. It's not just Black Lives That Matter; it's all lives that matter, and it seemed kind of a defensive response to the statement "Black Lives Matter." And usually, when somebody gets defensive about something, it's because they feel that there's an offense that is coming out them, and that's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
But did you kind of get that sense too, that there was a tone and again, this isn't judging anyone, and it's not even judging the movement. It's just feeling. You get a sense of that.
Yeah.
Did you get that same sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is so great because I've had so many conversations about this, because it really does have to do with tone, and tone has to do with motives.
Yes.
So the thing is, one, going back a little early to what you said, is when we're to prefer each other.
Yeah.
And put the other first, and even just amongst the body, that is a wild concept.
Yeah.
To put others first, and that includes even in so-called debate or other people's opinions. So the word says that we are actually, and it sounds crazy, but this is what the Lord said, so it must be possible to be of one mind and one opinion.
Yes.
If he says that, then it's possible to come to that. Mm-hmm. So when you hear Black Lives Matter, and then you hear All My Lives Matter, and then there is this tone, then my conversations with people, my studying, my asking the Lord, what is this? And it's many things in general. Of course, it's personal too. Mm-hmm. But it's competition. It's combativeness.
Yes.
We're not to compete. The Lord says that we are not to compete, because it means to combat.
Yes.
Battle. And so there also in that is offense.
Yeah.
And being offended is unforgiveness.
Yes.
And so there is this really fine line between like this righteous justice, where you want to come against injustice righteously.
Yes.
And you want to defend a group of people. But when it's to put down what someone else says,
yeah.
When it's an elitist thing,
yes.
When it's a hierarchy thing, when it's competition, and when it's rooted in offense, I think that's what we need to ask ourselves, really.
Yeah.
It's like, am I getting a twinge?
Right.
Even a little one of offense? And why am I offended by this statement or that person's statement?
Yes.
Why? So yes, with the tone, and even with my own, self-examination.
Yeah.
Why am I getting offended by All Lives Matter?
Yeah.
And is it because you're saying, because this is me, this is how I study the word too. I'll go, okay, people are saying Black Lives Matter. What does that mean? Black Lives Matter means I love everybody. I love people. I love God's creation. This group of people seems to be going through something emotionally and systemically. They matter. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute, but all lives matter.
Right.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And so I felt myself getting a tinge of.
You're like, no, wait a minute.
I know all lives matter. Why'd you say all lives matter?
Right. It's when someone says Black Lives Matter and then you come back with all lives matter, it seems dismissive.
That's the word.
It's dismissive.
It's dismissive.
And it's kind of like saying, Kimberly, I like you, but it's like, wait a minute, what's the but?
Yeah, why'd you but?
That just kind of like eliminated what you just first said. Yeah, Black Lives Matter, but. So I absolutely get that. And here's the other thing. They're not diametrically opposed to one another.
They shouldn't be.
Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. And I've heard the scenario or the analogy being used quite often. It's like, well, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Well, yeah, all lives matter. Well, yeah, if you're driving down the street and there's a house that's on fire, you want to put that fire out, and then someone's saying, no, you gotta spray all the houses. Well, that's not the one that's on fire.
Right.
So
right.
I get that analogy, and but I want to speak to that a little bit later, to that analogy and the mindset that is presented when you even speak that analogy, because there's a narrative that goes along with that that's important to dissect a little bit.
Okay.
So I think we can all agree that Black lives do matter. We just have to be careful with the tone of that. And this is on an individual basis. We're talking just individually. This is a broad statement that allows for a lot of personal and private interpretation. So that means that people's proclamation of this is very private to them. So you can have somebody out there yelling Black Lives Matter like they're angry and bitter at the world, or you can still have somebody out there that's saying Black Lives Matter, just saying, no, I matter. Please, I've been made to feel like I don't matter as much as somebody else. And this is an encouragement to me.
Yeah.
So I get that 100%. And when there's someone who has felt oppression or been put down or discouraged in any way, it's good to have a rallying call. I mean, we're at sporting events and colleges have their rallying calls and different things. So, it's like if you went to USC, fight on. You shout fight on because it's your rallying call to come together and go accomplish a goal. So I think for a lot of people, Black Lives Matter is simply a rallying call to go and make a change and make a difference.
Yeah.
And on that, I defend the statement, Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that tone is where I kind of want to transition a little bit.
Okay.
Because it comes from a place.
Yes.
There's a tone that has, whether it's been there from the beginning or it's developed, but it is absolutely felt, and it's undeniable, I think, especially in our current circumstances and the division that we see. There's absolutely a tone. So I want to pause before we get into that. I just want to put the number up again. So if there's anybody out there, you have a question, you have a statement, or anything that you want to contribute to the conversation, we invite you to go ahead and shoot that text over. It's 818-835-4030. 818-835-4030. Just wanted to make sure that was available. So transitioning a little bit, so we've talked about the message Black Lives Matter, and what that means to us as individuals.
Okay.
Now that message was developed with a mission behind it. And the Black Lives Matter movement is something that is very powerful. Right now, we're seeing that in the world. And anytime you see something powerful, anything that's moving, there's a strong mission behind it. And this is where I begin to separate myself from the movement. The statement I get and I agree with.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to find it in me to proclaim that, simply because
to proclaim
Black Lives Matter.
Gotcha.
And to be a proponent of that statement.
Okay.
Because publicly.
Gotcha.
Because of the tone and because of that there's a mission that goes along with it.
Okay.
And back 4 years ago, I had this conversation in a public forum, and being older and wiser now, I realized that my timing was off in having the conversation. There was a lot going on, and in an effort to try and address the issue, because that's what we're supposed to do as leaders, I had a forum on a Sunday to talk about racism and its impact, and then how we can begin to bridge those gaps.
Okay.
So I spoke a message, and because a lot of this is directed towards the police, I'm active with my the local police department here that's right across the street from my house, and I went to one of the captains that I'm friends with, and I asked her, I said, would you come to church with me so we can stand in unity and pray, and we can have a conversation together. So there were certain individuals in the church that did not receive that very well.
Is she a Christian, by the way?
No, she was not a Christian.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
To have that.
So then we had a little bit of a dynamic there.
Okay.
So she came to represent the police department, and we prayed together, and we spoke. And at the end of the service, in our time of prayer, I opened it up just to have a conversation so people can begin to talk about how they were feeling, what they were feeling. And emotions got raised, It probably would have been good to give it a week and let people kind of settle down a little bit. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't wasting time and not addressing something. But in the course of that conversation, I said, what I'm saying now is that, yes, I believe that Black Lives Matter, but I cannot support the movement. Boom! That was just a match that set off the room. And, I took a lot of heat for that.
Yeah.
I got called every name in the book. And this is by friends. People who, these were friends who were saying things, and, when you say something like that, you feel like you're going against your own, and you're going against your culture, and you get the traitor label and all the wonderful, colorful names that go along with that, which is fine, because I understand that people were in a place of high emotion. But the point is that I went to them individually, because they posted some things on Facebook. I said, let's have a conversation, just one-on-one. Talk to me about how you're feeling. Talk to me about what's going on in your mind. And had great conversations with a lot of people. But one of the questions that I asked them, I said, have you read their manifesto? Have you read their mission? Do you understand what they're about? And what was interesting is not one single person that defended the movement so passionately had taken the time to actually read their mission and what they were about.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because I didn't know, did they know there was they didn't call it this then, but did they know there was a Black Lives Global Network that actually had started that? Did they know?
I don't know. I don't know if they did, but that's just me.
Okay.
As soon as I see a large movement, a large mass of people, I always take notice and I do my research immediately. But again, this comes from a biblical worldview. I understand that the Bible says that broad is the path that leads to destruction, and many are those who find it.
Right,
but narrow is the way, and difficult is the path that leads to everlasting life, and there are few who find it.
Yeah.
So when I see a large group of people moving in one direction, I always remember that. I'm like, wait a minute, let me check that out first.
Yeah.
Before I go and I put my name to something, before I endorse something, I always want to make sure that I know what I'm endorsing and what it's about.
Yeah, smart.
So I just Googled it, the beauty of Google, and I read their mission and their manifesto, and they've made some slight modifications over the last 4 years,
right.
But it's essentially the same. And I was very concerned. I was very concerned about it, and more than what I read, I was also concerned that people were so quick to jump into a movement and not figure out all of what it was about.
Yeah, the what, why, and all that.
Yeah, and as again, as someone who seeks to follow the Lord, and I understand the spiritual dynamics that are exist in this world, I always want to make sure that I'm careful about what I join in, because I realize that there is an enemy, and the enemy's greatest weapon is always deception, and the strength of deception is in its proximity to truth. Mm-hmm. That is always the strength of deception.
Yes.
It gets so close to the truth. I shared today in a message that I delivered called Recognizing Truth, how I was in banking and I became very good at detecting counterfeits because I spent so much time studying the actual bill and the truth.
Sure.
So I feel likewise that the deception always looks so true until you look at the details, until you look at that watermark, until you run your finger across and you feel the texture of it. You have to stop and pause because it always looks really good.
Yeah.
So that was my point, and it remains my point now. Is this looks so good on the surface?
Yes.
Yes, Black Lives Matter. However, when you go a little bit deeper and you look at the fine print, it's a little bit of a concern. And I actually want to bring that up right now. I went ahead and pulled up some parts of the mission and vision. Now, I want to give a disclosure here. This isn't the entire mission and vision. These were distinct portions of it that raised a concern to me. Or there's some things in here that I completely agree with. So I just want to read. This is on the screen for our viewers at home. So the first line there says, Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where black lives, and this is in yellow here, I put this in yellow, the parts that really stood out to me. Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. So those words there in the first portion of it, that black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation of black folks' humanity, our contributions to this society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. So when I see that first part there, all of that looks good, but that yellow there was a concern to me, because it says that they are being systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. So when I hear that, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Is that true? And I've heard a lot of people, a lot of Christian friends of mine, post things on Facebook saying it's hunting season for black people.
Yeah, seen that.
It's hunting season. I'm like, whoa, that is a very strong statement, but we see that reflected in the mission here. And I do not believe that that is true at all. And statistically speaking, that's not true.
That you're saying it's not true at all. You believe it's not true at all that there is systemic racism?
No, I'm saying that we're not being systematically, intentionally targeted for demise. And I really would love for everyone to tune in next week when we talk about systemic racism. There's a lot that goes into that. I don't believe that we're being systematically and targeted for demise in the manner in which they go on to describe.
Okay.
However, I do believe that there is not a systematic plan. It's more of a diabolical plan.
Okay, with you.
And I'm going to explain that next week. It's something that I feel God revealed to me and spoke to me, and I haven't heard anyone talk about it, and I'm going to drop that next week, and I'd love to hear everyone's opinion on it. Maybe we'll have you back, because I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Or I'm calling in on that one.
Or at least calling in. So I want to go back to the verbiage there, and just see what else it says. So systematically, intentionally targeted for demise. So that means that we as a nation, or the world, because they don't specify here, are trying to kill black people. Like the intent and the purpose of the hunt is for black people. So that made me pause. I'll share a little bit later what was discovered in regards to that, but I want to keep going and kind of take a look at what else is said. So that was the first thing that caught my eye. The next, it says the call for Black lives to matter is a rallying cry for all black lives striving for liberation. So that term liberation. See, words are so powerful.
Yes.
Words are powerful because they put a picture in your mind.
Yes.
So when you hear the word striving for liberation, a black rallying call, striving for liberation, what is that? What picture comes to your mind?
Right. And hunting. And
yes.
It's a form of grooming.
Yes.
The public.
Yes. You're putting it in our minds. I'm hunted. I am a hunted person, and I'm in need of liberation. And it's hard for me to accept it. And I granted, I don't speak for all black people. Neither one of us do. All I can do is speak to my experience as a black person. And I have gone through some as I think back in my life, I'm going through some crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. I've been attacked by skinheads on multiple occasions, cornered. I mean, the whole thing. I've had adults lie and call the cops on me, all these different things. But even in the midst of that, and I credit this to the amazing environment created by my mother and my father, who raised us to know the Lord and to rely on Him. And we saw each other just as human beings, despite all the stuff that my father went through. And he went through some real stuff, like stuff you only see in the movies. He and my mom being married in 1965 when it was still illegal to be married in several states until 1967.
And that was my parents in 66,
Mm-hmm.
before it was legal in all states.
Right. Yeah, right before that. So we had similar experience in that. So I never felt oppressed. And that had more to do. See, liberation is more of a mindset than a physical reality. And we see that explained in the scriptures. That even though one can be bound, you are still free when you understand that you belong to God.
Right.
And that He has a plan and a purpose. And this life is very short. And any hardship that we endure here in this time can't be compared to the glory that awaits us in eternity. So I had that eternal perspective. Now, granted, not everybody has the blessing that we had to know and to understand that.
Right.
But when someone says liberation, just looking at it as a whole, are black people in the United States of America truly enslaved still? And I think that's a that's an interesting question to ask, and probably an interesting discussion to have as well. Are we truly enslaved? And if so, how and to what extent?
Right.
So the very word liberation means you're a slave.
Right. Right.
Have you ever felt like a slave?
Oppressed, but not a slave.
Mm-hmm.
And see, I see it from a Christian's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
talking to Christians. So that's a
Yes.
whole nother thing.
Yes.
So I actually understand the side of it that doesn't know Christ, that doesn't know liberation,
Yes.
because of all the crazy movie-like racist experiences I've had.
Yeah.
And I understand feeling constricted and feeling oppressed,
Yeah.
and in believing that I was.
Yeah.
But as a child of God, it's a completely different thing. And the
It's totally
conversation is a completely different thing. And that's where, in the conversations I've had at least, I know that it's getting over into emotion.
Yes.
It's in which is totally valid, but the emotion doesn't mean that it's the God's truth.
Right.
So I totally get feeling like I'm being held back, and legitimately sometimes I have been held back, targeted,
Yeah.
and held back. But who am I really in Christ?
Yes.
I am liberated. I am free. I have liberty in Him, no matter what my outward circumstances are.
Yes.
And so inwardly, but even outwardly, in Him, all things are possible. I can, if there is any kind of constriction,
Mm-hmm.
there is a way out.
Yes.
There is a way out. And for me to say anything different is a lie.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Now, even from someone who may be watching this who doesn't have a biblical worldview, I think we could all agree that the true prison is the mind.
Yeah, always.
That is the true prison. So the problem I have with this type of verbiage, that you're being systematically and intentionally targeted for your demise, that you're in need of liberation, that in and of itself, to me, is oppressive.
It's incitement language.
Yes. It's inciting, and it brings on the feeling like, you know what? Maybe I am oppressed. Maybe I do need to be set free. Now, for some people, perhaps that's a good thing, because maybe they have been operating in a place where they don't understand the freedom. But as a Christian, we know that that freedom only comes through Christ, because to exchange one master for another is not freedom at all.
Right.
So if you've been enslaved because of racism, to whatever extent, oppressed in whatever extent, but then now you come under the oppression of a mindset that makes you feel like perhaps maybe you're more oppressed than what you really are, I think that's just as dangerous.
It is. I always go to the spiritual side, because this is all. It always starts spiritually. It's always rooted spiritually. The all of this stuff that's stirred up is stirred up spiritually first, and so reading that, just the paragraph that you read, it reminds me of we can't be controlled by the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
He just suggests.
Yes.
He whispers.
Yes.
There's suggestions until you believe it. He's going to say it until you believe it. And that language that we just read, that totally reminds me, you know what? You're oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
You're being manipulated by the white man.
Yeah.
It totally reminds me of the enemy whispering suggestions.
Yes.
Until what you just demonstrated, I am.
Mm-hmm.
I think I am. And then I am.
Yeah.
You know?
And then it gets you into your emotions. And as I've said several times, emotions are wonderful indicators, wonderful motivators, but horrible leaders.
Right. That's
And,
good.
and they will lead us in a direction that is contrary to what will actually bring true peace, true happiness. We have to be able to stop and think about the things that are going on. We have to be able to stop and think about what's really being said. And, that's why I love something that the late now, Dr. Ravi Zacharias used to always say. He said, "It is my intent to get believers to think and thinkers to believe." And I think we as believers need to stop and think every once in a while and think, now wait a minute, what's really being said here?
Right.
What's really being communicated?
Right.
So I think that verbiage, it is, like you said, it is inciting something. It incites a certain mindset, a certain belief. And to be quite honest, it goes along with our carnal nature. We want to feel like we're in a place of disadvantage to a certain extent, because then it gives us the justification to do the things that we've always wanted to do, but we've been restrained from doing.
That's deep.
I've counseled many people over the years, and I've met so many people who have been angry over a certain event that happened in their life, angry at a certain person in their life, and they hold on to unforgiveness, and that unforgiveness turns into it transforms, evolves into what the Bible calls bitterness. Anger is fine. The Bible says be angry, just don't sin. Be angry, just make sure you do the right thing with that anger, that motivation. Do the right thing with it. But when it turns into bitterness, now it becomes self-destructive. And people will want to stay in that place of anger and bitterness because it makes you feel powerful. When you feel like you, whether it's actual or perceived, there's oppression, and then you have someone come along and say, you don't have to be this way anymore. There's an empowerment that comes over you. There's an anger once the realization hits you, and you want to hold on to that anger because anger is power. It literally releases chemicals in your body that make you strong, and you'll say things that you wouldn't normally say. You'll do things that you wouldn't normally do. That's why when you get angry, you type out on Facebook, but before you hit send, you're supposed to think and go, wait, hold on. Maybe I shouldn't say that. So it gets us into this place, but we feel strong. Yeah. We feel powerful. And I think that these types of language, they are empowering. Maybe not in the best sense. Yeah. Maybe not in the best sense. It is a sense of power that comes from that. I want to jump back in here. Third section here. It says Black Lives Matter began as a call to action in response to state-sanctioned violence and anti-black racism. State-sanctioned. State-sanctioned. See, it's the little things. So here we are again, where now it is the state, and the state being the government of the United States. So what they're saying is America is intentionally sanctioning violence and racism against black people. And statistically speaking, that's just not true. Harvard sociology professor did an analysis, and the United States of America is technically the least racist and has the most opportunities for African Americans, black people, than anywhere else in the world. Black people in America are wealthier and better off than any black people anywhere else in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that there's still not racism or oppression or anything, but what I'm saying is that it is actually proven that we have a better life here as black people than anywhere else on the planet. True. And that's just fact. There's no feeling behind it. It's just a fact. So when we say that there is state-sanctioned racism and violence, you're saying the United States of America wants people to be violent towards you. And that's just not a true narrative at all. Now, here's the thing. Was it true?
Yes, it was true. And there are still pockets of groups.
Yes. That
target.
Yes.
It's diminishing.
Yes.
But yes, it was true as a whole, or in general, and it's fortunately the percentages are a lot lower as far as that goes. Yeah. But they're talking about, they said state sanctioned. So let's just look at states. There are certain states that have more challenges in that area than others.
Right.
But the diabolical behind the scenes plans, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
We only know the fruit of it.
Right.
And the experiences. But as a whole,
we're getting better. We're getting so much better. And I think that's one of the things that we have to start doing is we have to look at the United States of America as we would an individual. Let's say the United States of America is an individual human being and person. When we were young, we did foolish things. We ran with the wrong crowd, and we did what everybody else was doing. everybody had slaves. So the idea that because America had slaves, that racism is in our DNA is absolutely ridiculous. If that is true, then the entire world has racism in their DNA, and you're not exactly off because the entire world is born into sin. Racism is nothing more than sin.
Right.
So if we look at America as, when it started out, it was just a little kid that was running around playing with guns and didn't know what to do, and it was just doing what everybody else was doing. Great Britain had slaves. Africa had slaves. The Muslim world had slaves. Europe had slaves. Everybody had slaves.
I would add a little kid, a bratty little kid, who, wanted their way. If the kid had words, the kid would say, "I want that."
Yeah.
So so it's mine. I see that, so it's mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that's a whole other.
That's a whole other.
We need to have a whole show on manifest destiny. And what is that, and what does it mean? So that's a great one. We should take notes on that one. Manifest destiny. We need to talk about that. But we're a little
but in
kid.
The negative sense, I'm talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just.
Yes. No. I get that 100%.
Okay.
So United States, we're a little kid, and we grow up and we realize that what we're doing is wrong. I don't think there's anybody watching this or who's going to watch this that can identify with being a kid, being younger, and doing things that were just stupid. And then you get older and you learn, you're like, you know what, that was wrong. I need to make the correction. And if you didn't make the correction, there was punishment and there was consequences to that. I think we can say that we have grown as a nation and we've gotten better because we've come to a place of greater maturity. We've realized some of the things that we were doing is wrong, and we've made so many corrections to what's happened that where this used to be a horrible place for black people, it's now the best on the planet, statistically speaking. So I think we have to speak to that more than we speak about the past. If I was to bring up your past all the time and I constantly judged you based on the things that you used to do, you used to be, how would you feel? It gives no credit to your growth as a person in who you are right now.
Right.
That would be disrespectful for me to constantly bring up your past.
Right.
Why do we do that about America?
Yeah.
Yes, and look, I still make mistakes. I make a ton of mistakes. I made a billion mistakes. I'm surprised that God even trusts me to speak to anybody. It's a miracle that I'm sitting here right now. I don't deserve it. But He did something in my heart and changed me. And I think we can say that God has done something in the heart of America, collectively as a nation, that has changed us, that has gone from being a place where slavery was promoted, defended, and we even went to war about it, to a place now where we can say that blacks have more opportunity here than anywhere else on the planet. That's something that we should be proud of. We shouldn't, that's not to say that we forget our past. Yes, we learn from the past. That's what we've done and helped us move forward. But when we say that there's state-sanctioned violence, it's really, I think, judging us more based on our past and the minute things that happen to minorities, rather than giving the nation, and I'm not saying the politicians, I mean us as a culture, I mean us as a people, I mean us as people who talk to each other and don't treat each other bad because of the past, that we actually stand up and say, hey, that's wrong, that's something of the past, we don't do that anymore.
Now, I'd like to just add to what you're saying as far as looking at the past. I have looked at the past, and I think statistics are a part of looking at the past.
Yeah.
Looking at the past is a form of demonstrating or proving a pattern.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So in that sense, I think it can be healthy, depending,
yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
If you're in a courtroom, you have to look at the past in order to justify not justify a situation. You have to look at pattern, right?
Yeah.
In proofs. So there are proofs from the past that actually influence the current.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's true.
Yes.
But to root and ground our identity, our present identity in the past, that is unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
But I have done it. I have looked at the past, my experiences,
yeah.
the experiences of my family,
Yeah.
And you do that sometimes to make sense of the now.
Yeah.
It's a learning thing. There's something else you said that was interesting. You said, why do we look at America patterns? I want to ask you about culture because you keep bringing that up, but I don't think people are looking at. You said I don't think people are looking at the whole. I believe you said, and I think one of the reasons is I don't know that we all can see the whole.
Yeah.
I believe many people are seeing their situation, and some situations are just right here. You know, some are your large family.
Yeah.
And some are see the world, and some of those people, and I was one of those people, where my world was filled with racism.
Yeah.
And if that's all I see and all I encounter, then
that's your perception.
That's my perception.
And perception
that's the
is
lens.
reality. Yeah.
And that was my reality. And I'm constantly fighting perverse men and racist men. Constantly. And it hasn't stopped, by the way. So when you say it's gotten better, I agree.
Yeah.
For some people, it actually hasn't. There are some people in certain pockets of the world that racism hasn't gotten better, and I'm one of them.
Yeah.
You would think that I have seen less since I moved from Minneapolis. Nope. I get it just as much here in Los Angeles, where other people that look like me haven't had one bit of racism, which is really interesting because that goes to the spiritual side, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, there's a deep
That's
conversation,
a deep one.
but very, very true. And you bring up a very good point. Our perspective of the world is shaped by our personal experience.
That's right.
And
other people's.
Yeah, and other people's. And we also remember there's a scripture that says deep cries out to deep, which means that I guess a negative and secular way of saying that would be misery loves company. So what it's saying is that whatever's inside of you, it cries out to it, or it attracts things that are similar. So when you've had certain situations, then there's usually something in us that I don't want to say attracts, but necessarily it recognizes that in other people, and there's a drawing together. So when that happens, you share your experiences with somebody else who shares that experience. There's a bond that happens, and then now you have two realities, two perspectives agreeing together. So I think that's a powerful dynamic that happens too, is all of a sudden you find agreement with other people, and like, wait a minute, this is true. And then as that they come together, it also compounds. Yeah. It compounds the experiences. Yeah. You know, and this can be used in the positive or in the negative. So I think it really takes that time to sit back, because obviously you don't carry yourself like someone who's been through all that. And we attribute that to Christ. That's right. Because we are free.
And my mother.
And your mom. Don't you just love the mamas?
And my grandmother, yeah.
Love them. Come on.
The good ones.
Yes, all the good ones. So I think that's powerful. But you see how wording like this can really play into those parts that allow us to see that. I mean, I think it's beautiful when someone steps out of their world and is able to see, okay, there's different people, there's different places, there's different mindsets.
They have to intentionally do that.
The same. Yes, and that
it's work. That's a fight sometimes.
That's right. It's got to be intentional. Yeah. And I think the greatest thing that we can do when we start organizations, when we start things, is try and help people see not just what things were, not just the bad that is, but that there is growth. And I think that's one part of Black Lives Matter that I would like to see a little bit more of is, hey, let's acknowledge the growth without losing momentum for where we're going. Again, we don't want to lose the momentum, and emotion drives movement. It drives a movement. So I understand the appeal to the emotion, but we got to be careful not, I don't want to say the wrong word here. We have to be careful that we don't emphasize one thing so much that it completely diminishes another.
In
focusing on so much on what needs to be worked on, that we don't emphasize how much has happened and how far we've come. We have to have both of those. Otherwise, we create despair and not hope. And
you're talking like you're saying this too. That's what you want to see in the Black Lives Matter. You're talking about not the Black Lives Matter that
not the
organization.
message.
You're talking about Christians.
Christians, and not even just in Christians, but in the organization. If they adopted a little bit more of that, it would be helpful.
How can you require, request, and want that from them, from unbelievers?
Right.
That's my question to you, Jesse.
Yeah.
As a pastor, as a believer, do we dare ask that of someone where the value system is completely different? Motives.
Yeah.
The go-to for intent is different. Why are you even asking that, or why are you wanting that of them?
The reason I would feel comfortable asking that is because I don't believe that it's an exclusively spiritual principle. It doesn't require an exclusive understanding of the Spirit of God in order to grasp that. There are certain things that are self-evident or can be proven just through reason and philosophy.
Yeah.
And when you look at just human psychology and how we are as human beings, if I told someone that they're just bad, if you don't do this, you're going to be, let's just use an example. You're going to be just like your father. You're going to be just like your father. He was a loser. You better do this or you're going to be just like your father. If I keep saying that over and over without any vision, without any hope, without any encouragement, we're saying, hey, we can do this. You know what? You've come so far. You have done such an amazing job in this. I think that's just good coaching if you're a coach. That's good mentoring if you're a mentor. That's good teaching if you're a teacher. And these aren't things that are exclusive to the Christian world. These are just things that we know just through general revelation and general understanding. So I make the appeal more from that standpoint than the spiritual dynamic.
Gotcha. That's
if that
good.
makes sense.
Yeah, that's great.
So I want to take a look at some of these next ones here, and I'm also going to look and see if we've got any text coming in.
Come on, people, talk to us.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Communicate.
They're starting to come in. So we'll address these in just a second. I want to get through some of these points real quick because there's a lot to discuss in this. So to the fourth section here, it says the impetus for the commitment was and still is the rampant and deliberate violence inflicted on us by the state. So again, there is rampant. That means that it is all the time, all over the place. Violence inflicted on us, black people, by the state.
Just that one sentence: rampant, deliberate, violence inflicted. Mm-hmm. Super strong. A commitment.
Yes.
That's another one.
Yes.
Those are seriously. It's a grooming statement.
Yes, absolutely. You're not stating truth. You're imparting truth.
Right.
You're imparting a mindset. There's a difference between acknowledging a mindset and then imparting it. That verbiage, if anybody's studied psychology, if anyone's studied anything that has to do with influencing human beings in the mind, those are very deliberate, purposeful words that are intended to stir someone towards feeling, emphasis on feeling, not thinking, feeling a certain way.
And we have to understand that organizations, especially if they're large known, they're usually writers, journalists, there are marketers, and the root of all that is manipulation.
Yes.
They are wanting us to feel, to think, to agree, to buy, to join, whatever.
Yes.
And they are masters
Yes.
at manipulation. They're masters at words.
Yes.
They're masters at the combination of words. So none of those words are accidental.
No, that is all very purposeful, very intentional. And when we get to the we haven't even really dug in to why I will not support the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to see that
the
in a
global
little
network, as they call themselves.
Yeah, the global network. The global network. So, next one, it says, we work vigorously for freedom and justice for black people, and by extension, all people. So I put that in there because there is an acknowledgement that by furthering the cause of black people who are oppressed and are still feeling disenfranchised and all those things, that inevitably that does benefit all people, and that is true. So I wanted to acknowledge that and say that this is a very true statement, and I appreciate that it's in there.
That's a great
in their
statement.
framework. Moving on, it says, we are unapologetically black in our positioning. In affirming that Black Lives Matter, we need not qualify our position. And you know what? That's a very bold and very strong statement. And I agree with that. You don't need to qualify it. But again, there's some posturing going on here. There's a projection of power that's intended to stir you up and make you feel their power. So it's intentional there. It says, to love and desire freedom and justice for ourselves is a prerequisite for wanting the same for others. And again, very well said.
Yeah.
And I would tend to agree with that statement. Now, so far, what we've seen is some deliberate wording that emphasizes certain emotions and thoughts in order to drive a narrative. And
if there's the slight of any pre-thought to that, it just solidifies,
yes,
encourages, and again incites.
Yes, and it incites. So now let's take a look at this. This is where I get, you know what? Hold on. Let's pause before we go on to the new one. I want to acknowledge some of our people who are texting in. So let's talk to everybody who's in. And we won't use your name unless you want us to use your name. This is completely anonymous. So it says here. So if saying all lives matter is in response to what is being touted by Black Lives Matter organization, is that wrong? Also, can you please address who is really behind or funding Black Lives Matter? Okay, so 2 quick questions there. So, is that wrong to say all lives matter? Well, let me say this. In the spirit of freedom of speech, no, you can say what you want. But in a spirit of reconciliation, which what we're called to do as Christians and believers, and again, reconciliation meaning that we build bridges to one another and we reconcile to one another with the hope of reconciling people to God through Christ Jesus. We want to make sure that we are not purposely inciting someone who's already in an emotional state with something that doesn't need to be said. So if somebody says Black Lives Matter, I'm not going to necessarily come back at them and say, oh yeah, well, all lives matter. I think it's a better thought would be to open up the conversation and just acknowledge and say, hey, you know what? Man, when you say that, there's passion behind it. What have you experienced in your life? What's driving you? And you open up the conversation so then now that way you're talking to a heart and not talking to a hashtag.
Yeah, because understand that when Black Lives Matter, the hashtag first came out, and the reasons it first came out, there were a lot of things going on publicly that we were finding out publicly. All Lives Matter the police just started to All Lives Matter, and it was to say but.
Yeah, it was that but.
And then other people joined in but. And so for someone to say, I'm really hurting right now. I just lost my business. Yeah, but I have my business. My business is thriving. Mm-hmm. Other people's businesses I know are thriving.
Right.
To butt that person's experience, it's not thoughtful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's now at the same time, I got to throw this out there.
Please.
I refuse to be a slave to someone's emotionalism.
Right. That's good.
People use emotion to bully. And I've seen a lot of bullying on behalf of the hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pin that on the movement and the people necessarily, but I have seen people saying things like, "Oh, you're not doing enough. If all you're doing is this, that's not enough." As if your social media, social justice is changing the world. It's a very judgmental place, and I'm speaking to Christians who have done this. I see brothers and sisters who call themselves Christians trying to shame and guilt people into saying Black Lives Matter, talking about Black Lives Matter as if that's what I'm supposed to proclaim, and that's not right. And it's emotionalism and it's bullying. So we don't bow down to people's emotions. We let them feel their emotions. But I think one of the things that we need to remember when we're in a place of high emotion is just because you're there doesn't mean that everybody else is going to be there.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, remember, like we said, misery loves company. If you're not feeling miserable with me, if you're not hurting pain, and I don't mean to sound condescending with that. That's not what I mean. It's just a term that we can all relate to because we've heard it before. But if pain cries out to pain, and people aren't feeling the exact same amount of pain as you. There's sometimes where you can say, I don't understand why you're not feeling this. So we can't guilt people for not being able to completely identify. We want to come with compassion, because that's one of the things that Christ came with. He was able to identify and feel other people's pain. But if someone's not able to do that, or they don't get it, you can't just be mad at them and say, well, you're not getting it. It's like, well, okay, well, I'm sorry, but I'll be here for you. So we
it
don't
goes
want
to intent again.
Yeah.
And why? So that what you brought up was all lives matter.
Yeah.
So why are you saying Black Lives Matter?
Mm-hmm.
And why are you saying all lives matter?
Right.
It goes to intent again.
Right.
So to answer her question, or partially, why? I mean, why are you asking?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why are you responding in that way? All
Right.
lives matter. If it's pure,
Right.
please talk while I drink.
No, go right ahead. I think that's a great point. Is why do we feel we need to say all lives matter? And I think part of it too is that when somebody says Black Lives Matter, it's a very exclusive term. When
That's
you say
what scares people.
Yeah, you say Black Lives Matter, it's exclusive, which means that if it's exclusive, it means it's excluding others. So there's a feeling of rejection when you say Black Lives Matter. And we have to believe, love assumes the best. Let's not assume that they're trying to reject us. They're just trying to elevate their cause and their purpose. So that's one of the dangers of being so exclusive, is that you can give the sense that you're trying to distance yourself from people or elevate yourself above people. But we just have to be secure enough to say, you know what? This is something that this individual needs right now. Let's let them feel that and be in that. And if there's a behavior or something or a tone or a way that they are with you that comes through when they say that, then you just have a private conversation. Hey, you know what? When you said that to me, when you shouted Black Lives Matter and said you're not doing enough, it kind of took me for a loop here, because I haven't done anything but be your friend.
Yeah.
And I felt attacked. You can have that conversation and then let that develop into what it is. But I want to get to the second part of that question real quick. Who's funding Black Lives Matter? A lot of people are funding Black Lives Matter. And I know I haven't done the research to actually trace the money. I know what people say about it, but I haven't seen all of exactly who's funding, and I haven't seen the evidence of it. So I'm not gonna speak to that specifically, but it's worth doing the research.
And while you're looking at the next question, I just want to add to the whole, if someone is feeling something,
Mm-hmm.
we can't be manipulated by their feelings.
Yeah.
We shouldn't allow ourselves to be manipulated. There's another side of that I know I've been having a conversation with people about, and that is mourning with those who are mourning.
Yes.
And so, especially in our inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
even if we can't understand it, even if we're numb, we're trying to figure it out, why someone is mourning, why someone's angry.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually possible for us to be able to mourn with them, because the Lord says to mourn with them.
Yeah.
He is God, the God of empathy,
Yes.
of love. And so when I used to not be able to relate to a few situations that I've now been through, but situations other people were going through, but I prayed, Lord, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a robot around these people. And they're talking to me, and I'm more logical.
Yeah.
And so I'm processing it. I'm like thinking, get over it. Just shake it off. Just get over it and move on.
And I have to admit, that's kind of my approach too. And that's a hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's a hard thing.
Yeah. And so I would suggest to ask the Lord, just pray, Lord, will you increase my capacity to love? And if I can, if it's okay, I would like to mourn with them.
Yeah.
And He'll give you some, whatever you can handle or should have. He'll give you some, even if you don't understand. But He can also give you understanding without having experienced it.
Amen. That's good. And you know what? We should have that heart as Christians. And that's something that I've talked to the Lord about, because I'm very much the same. I'm very linear, very logical, task-oriented. Okay, let's get it done. I've had some bad things happen to me, and I'm just being honest. My approach can be, and I don't want this to be directed at George Floyd and what happened there, because that did impact me. That absolutely had an impact on me. But I'm one having gone through a lot as a child and lots of different things, my mindset is, all right, that stunk. Let's get back up and let's keep moving.
Right.
I don't linger in it very long. So I don't know if it's a lack of empathy or if it's a motivation to keep moving forward.
It's also a bent.
Yeah.
And so any of us who are like that, we need God's help to be the mourners and the empathers, the empathizers.
Yeah.
You know, we have to.
Yeah.
And we have to also be ourselves, because they also need us.
Yeah.
People who are let their emotions be their rudder.
Yeah.
Need people like us.
So that they can be. That's why I love Jesus.
I love him.
He was just so on point with everything. He had compassion for the people, and it moved him to serve. It moved him to do things. It moved. A lot of his greatest miracles were because he was moved with compassion, you know. But then he also did something about it. He was moved, and he fed the 5,000. He was moved, and he cried. Jesus wept. He cried when he saw Mary and the other sister of Lazarus crying because their brother had died. He wept. But I always tell people, it's also the shortest verse in the Bible, because he wept and then he got up and raised that dude from the dead. So there was that.
He's like, next.
He's like, I feel you. Now let's go do something awesome. So I get that. Next question, we kind of spoke to it already. It says the tone can be interpreted as only Black Lives Matter. Hence the creation of All Lives Matter. And yeah, I get that too. It kind of speaks to that feeling exclusive and putting others aside as a result of the statement that is being made. But I think that we can adopt a mindset of understanding. And if you hear that there's fireworks going off in the background, people are...
Nobody's shooting.
Yeah, nobody's shooting.
It's okay.
I don't have that much viewership yet. You know, they're celebrating the conversation. So yeah, we just want to watch the tone. Yes.
I want to speak to that too.
Yeah.
It seems like people are saying only Black Lives Matter, and so this. Forgive me if I'm off, but in my conversations with many of my white friends and family, in many cases, they don't actually have inner circle Black people in their lives. Those who are saying or who think it's exclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if you have, intimate people who you have their phone number and they're at your house and you're at their house, kind of Black people, if you are white. If you have those people in your lives, then you'll know that it's not exclusive. Mm-hmm. And you'll hear more about their experiences. So I get if you think that, because one of my closest friends felt like she was being excluded by seeing someone say Black Lives Matter, but she's like, what about me?
Yeah.
You know, but it's just an understanding of one, the meaning of that particular person who said that, and then you need Black folks in your life. You just need them.
Right. It's funny when you were saying that. I realized when we have these conversations, we can get so compartmentalized and we start thinking only in black and white. And I just realized that's not the only point of exclusion. You know, Black people in this nation haven't cornered the market on oppression. There are people who are oppressed for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
You know, people are made fun of and oppressed because of their weight, because of the way they look, how attractive or unattractive they are. For all these different reasons, people, if you're a male, if you're a female, all these different reasons, people get oppressed. So I think sometimes if you felt that oppression from even another area in your life, if you felt rejected because of another thing that's going on in your life, when you hear Black Lives Matter, that just feels like another point of rejection that you're feeling. So you can be reacting from the collective experience, not necessarily against, Black Lives Matter, but collectively you're reacting because this is just another area that you're feeling rejected in. Yeah. So we bring a totality of experiences to us, whether it's experience you've had because you're Black or because you're a woman or because you're a Christian or because you're tall or whatever that is. We bring all of those to the table. It's not like we leave those over here. Okay, I felt rejected over here, but I'm only feeling rejected here. No, rejection is rejection across the board. Yeah. So we have to acknowledge those places in our life, because that's a point of healing for us too. If something like that might be hitting us in a certain way, there's probably something that we need to look at internally there as well. So,
What you got?
all right, let's see. We're going to do one more question, and then there's we still haven't even gotten to the good stuff, y'all. We still haven't even gotten to the good stuff. So, okay, this one's a little long. Why do you feel like if you don't post how you feel about issues on Facebook or Instagram, that you don't care about it and they judge you, saying you're being silent? Saying you're being silent is exposing where you stand or how you think. Okay, I see what you're saying. So if you don't post things on Facebook or Instagram, they're saying you don't care and you're being silent. That seems unfair. Why do they feel that you have to use these platforms to back up how you feel or where your heart is? Only God knows where your heart is. That is judgment on a person without knowing the truth. This just seems to be causing more division if you look at people and judge their character and how they feel or think through this filter. Kimberly, I'm going to let you hit that one.
I know who posted that, and girl, I'm so sorry. I love you. It's just sin and it's emotions, really, and it's also we can't speak. No one person can speak for a whole group. I can't speak for all Black people or women or whatever. But a lot of people may be, thinking, fight for me. It's their subtext may be, speak up for me, fight for me, and if you don't love me or you don't care about me. And one of my still living mentors, Dr. A.R. Bernard, who is so amazing. If you don't know him, look him up. He says about these current events, racism and speaking up, because he has been criticized for not speaking up as quickly as they expected him to. You have to know your lane. You have to know your timing. You have to know what you're supposed to say. You have a certain assignment of people. And my logical side to you who texted that would be like, what they think is not your problem. But right. The other side of this is you care about those people. If it's outside of the fear of man, if you care about those people, just have a conversation with them. Yeah. Otherwise, the people otherwise just it's fear of man. Otherwise, fear of how what they're thinking about regarding you, or what you're doing or not doing. And also, there's this side where part of the whole Black Lives Matter or anything that's gone on, especially globally, there is an amazing thing about unity. Yeah. And there's like a power to it, both negative and positive. But if there's the train is going and everybody's on the train and you're not on the train, and a train that really means something to someone, it's actually hurtful, which goes to offense. So to you, my sister who texted that, or anyone, that's also part of it. If people are deciding to judge you and criticizing you for not doing what they want, it's manipulation, and it is a form of offense. This is like, Lord help them. That's all I have to say. Yeah. Lord help them.
And I'll be honest with and again, I speak to mostly Christians. I don't expect people who don't understand the principles of God to embrace this fully, even though I think there's a certain level of common sense that the good Lord has granted us as just His creation.
Did you just sound like an old man? You went, the good Lord, and I actually saw this in my mind.
You know what? I almost did it. If the table wasn't here and I could come up fast enough, there's all this gray right here. But the good Lord has given us a mind to think with and to reason with, and you would think that people would be able to reason certain things. But I believe that one of the things and one of the dynamics that you see with Black Lives Matter, and any time there's a global movement, is human beings want to belong to something. And part of belonging to something is getting involved, and then you get to I wanted to say hijack, but that's not a positive. You get to glean off of the power of that movement. So what I've seen, just being honest, is a lot of people who don't feel powerful get involved with this to glean off the powerful, now they feel powerful. Now they feel like they have a voice. So they'll jump in on this and start saying the rhetoric and saying those things and making demands on people because it gives them value. Now I can be associated with this. And if I do this, then now I have value to people. Now I have a voice. Now I'm doing something. Now I'm saying something. So in their zeal for belonging, in their zeal for now having a voice, in a zeal for them now feeling like they matter, they go after people in a very aggressive way. And they're not so much attacking you as they are trying to build themselves, because a lot of times they may feel like they're in a place where they don't really belong. And I'll just be honest, that's something that I've seen. We talked about patterns earlier. That is a pattern that I've seen, because it's interesting. A lot of the people that are most vocal about it are the ones that you don't usually hear about or hear from a lot of times, if you notice that. So I think just as Christians, we need to be conscious of how we're feeling and why we're really doing things. What's really missing? Go ahead.
And you said something so awesome. Is you said people want to belong to something, and this could go deep for like hours, but we actually were made to need to belong because we are the body.
Yes.
And so this kind of stuff when it's rooted in a worldly idea, it is a perversion of the body of Christ.
Yes.
It's a perversion. We're jumping in on, we're wanting to be, we feel a draw, a pull to be a part of this because we're made that way.
Yes.
But it is a perversion. It can be a perversion.
Yes.
The cause can be good, the fruit can be good, but we're actually not to partner up with the world. We're not to partner up with the ideas, the ways, the patterns of the world. And so that's the phrase I saw when you said that. And I actually saw in my mind this twisted, nasty, perverted form of the body of Christ.
Yes.
Because we need.
It's filling a void that's supposed to be filled by the church, by the fellowship with the saints.
Right.
So if we're Christians,
and the unity of
that, if we're Christians, and we feel it, and we got to be honest with ourselves. If we're not honest with ourselves and we're lying to ourselves, then we're in serious trouble. We got to be able to be conscious of what's going on in our hearts and minds, and allow the Holy Spirit, allow the Word to guide us in that. But if we're supposed to be a part of the body of Christ, but something like this comes along and you need to embrace it, I guarantee you, if you're a believer, you're feeling disconnected from the body. I guarantee you, you have been disconnected from the body in some way. You don't belong. So now you're looking for something to belong to. And this comes along, and I'm sorry, it's an easy train to jump on. Post a couple things, get mad when other people are mad, jump in on it. And I'm not doubting the sincerity of any and everyone. I'm just saying that this is a social dynamic. It is a psychological phenomenon, and it is real. It is studied, it is verified. This is how we think. But we have to not be carnally minded. We have to be spiritually minded if you are a believer. If you're not a believer and you're watching this, these are some of the spiritual and dynamic truths that exist that we learn through the scriptures, through the Bible. And if you search your heart right now, even if you're not in complete agreement with the approach and the full context, just the principle itself should ring true to you if you really think about it. So I want to encourage those who maybe don't believe, to really just let that settle in and just say la. That's what it says in the Bible. It means stop, pause, and meditate on that. And
it's not to say that some of these things that are going on in the world, movements, organizations, are wrong. For example, if there is an organization that's not Christian that wants to that is dealing with sex trafficking or saving the planet or whales or whatever, God wants health in those areas.
Absolutely.
He wants wholeness and salvation. That's what one of the definitions of salvation is, the wholeness in those situations.
Yes.
And so it has so much to do with the fruit, the reason, the purpose, the motives, and the intents. The word says, I think I quoted this earlier, as I am, so are you in the world. So are these things that the Lord partnered up with, or things he created, or things that he initiated, and the world also happens to be doing that.
Right.
So those are questions we can ask ourselves.
And you know what? That's a great segue into the next few lines that we're going to read.
I knew it.
And this is and this is where I completely separate from the global network of Black Lives Matter. Sorry, that one came up a little early. So we talked about let me go back one. Let me make sure. Yeah, okay. So it says, we are self-reflexive and do the work required, listen to this, to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk, especially black trans women, who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. So just to break that down real quick, that they want to, I'm going to put it up against you.
I didn't know one of those words. I had to look it up.
Dismantle cisgender privilege. Cisgender it's a word that's used to describe someone who is, they identify with the biology that God has given them. So what that means is you are born a man, you believe you're a man, and you have the desires of a man, and that is to be with a woman romantically. So that is considered cisgender. Wow. So they want to dismantle cisgender privilege. That word privilege is a word that gets thrown.
I'm about to stand up and walk out right now.
Okay.
That's what that means?
That's what that means. Let's read it again. They want to dismantle cisgender privilege. So in other words, they believe that people who identify with the way that God has created them, that means if you are a man, you are born with man parts, you have man desires, and you fulfill those desires. You are born a woman, you have woman parts, and you have God-given woman desire. You are a cisgender, and you have privilege. And they want to dismantle that privilege. Well, I have a problem with that, because that privilege is not a privilege that is given to us because of society. It is a privilege that we have for walking righteously with God. That is a God-given ordinance. So they want to dismantle that. I'm sorry, that is, we'll get into this later. I want to go through all that, because I see your eyes just lit up. I want to hear, but let's get all the way through this, Kimberly.
Okay, I'll try.
Watch. It gets better.
Leave. If you say, hear your car start, it's mine.
Yeah, I'm telling you. And this is taken directly from their site. Listen, we dismantle, listen to these words, dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. So they want to dismantle the patriarchal practice. First of all, the idea of a patriarchy is stating that men have the responsibility of being heads of the house. And as heads of the house, according to the scriptures, it is our job to protect and provide. Those are the first two jobs that God gave a man in the Bible. You protect and you provide. So if you want to dismantle the very purpose of man, which is to protect and provide, you actually force women into a position where they're working double shifts and not being able to take care of the family. Having a patriarch in the home is what prevents that, and we're going to prove that in a little bit. But they want to dismantle the patriarch system. Fathers, male role models in the home. Next, we listen to this. You're going to love this. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure.
My Lord. My Lord.
We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. That's a wonderful way of saying that they don't believe that a mother and father in the household raising the children together is the best way for family to operate.
Even though proven, it's been okay.
Proven.
I'm just gonna.
And let's work. They want to disrupt that. They want to disrupt the nuclear family.
My goodness.
That is That is an institution of God, and it is written as one of their goals to disrupt it. And we haven't even
Oh boy.
really gotten started here.
Oh boy.
The last one here. We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention, this is the intention, of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteroformative thinking, or rather the belief that all in the world are heterosexual unless she or he or they disclose otherwise. What does that mean? They want to get away from the idea that men are men and women are women. They want to disrupt and loosen the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. So, in those statements, right there, they are against male influence and headship in the house. They are against the nuclear family, and they are against heteronormality. The reason why this is so important, I'm just reading those out loud.
Are you okay? First of all, are you okay?
Yes,
Okay.
you see me. You see
Are
me.
you gonna be okay?
And this is where Black Lives Matter isn't really considering Black lives. And this is where I really get strong about this. Everything that they just said, everything that they're promoting, is why the black community is being disrupted. This is why it is difficult to progress. Everything they're standing against is exactly what the black community needs to advance. And I'm going to prove that statistically, but I want you to just go for a minute.
I don't know how deep I can go here. I don't even know if I have the words. I have grief in me, and I'm holding back tears. Even though the Lord said all this would unfold, one of the things He said was that times would get to where it was almost unbearable, meaning you would almost grit your teeth, and it would be hard to bear. Like these things are hard to bear, and some of you watching this may seem completely normal, but there is a spirit behind this. It is a spirit of feminism. Mm-hmm. It's a perverse spirit. It gets deep. You guys can go and research this on the strong man behind this and the female demonic entity that's behind this. I'll just leave it at that. But
Jezebel, let's just say
it goes deep. And if that's their belief, everybody, thank you, Jesus. He gave us all the gift of deciding whatever we want to believe. But in my heart, that was two different visions, mission statements in one. Mm-hmm. on one site. You have Black Lives Matter. Black people have value and should be treated as such. There's your site. There's your organization. And all the other stuff, if you believe that, separate it from Black lives. Don't put it with my Black Lives Matter.
But the thing is,
but
it's there.
It's there. There it is.
And see, this is, you said there's a spirit. And for those of you who are watching, who again, you may not be familiar with Christian lingo and the way we express the truths that we've come to understand. When we say spirit, we're not just speaking of a disembodied celestial being that you cannot see. The word spirit in the Bible actually means mindset as well, attitudes. So there's a mindset and an attitude that permeates an organization from the very roots, from the very bottom up. So I guess the way to describe it is when you listen to a song that moves you, you can hear where that person was when they wrote that song, and you can feel it, and you can identify with it, and it moves your heart and your emotions. So that's what we mean by there's a spirit behind it. Now we also believe that there is literally a spiritual realm where there are spiritual beings that are influencing us, and they get behind things. And there's good spirits and there's bad spirits.
And initiate things.
And yes, they initiate, they instigate, they influence, they oppress. They do all the things to move human beings in a direction that is contrary to their creator. There's a whole reason why. But just taking it from just a secular, naturalistic viewpoint, these statements are contrary to the very purpose that they outline. And that spirit behind it, that motive, that's what you feel when you're thinking, ooh, Black Lives Matter, what is that? There's a spirit, there's a mindset, there's an attitude that has birthed this, and you feel it in everything that's being said. That's where the mindset comes in. It is absolutely perpetuating a mindset, a thought pattern that is contrary to God, which is why I won't post Black Lives Matter. Because it's not just the statement that they've hijacked, it is the mindset that they are trying to perpetuate through that. And I want to take a look at those first two things: the narrative that we are under attack and that we are being hunted, and in state sanctioned hunting, and then the perspective of family and their blatant attack on family, the state, Black people being hunted. This whole these last few weeks was instigated by the murder of George Floyd. And I want to acknowledge this. That was a murder. That was unnecessary, uncalled for. And I know there was a lot of factors involved. I know what the autopsy put out there. But the fact of the matter is that he was handled in a way that caused him to die, and it was at the hands of another person. That is murder. And I also want to do a quick thing. I think it's in very poor taste to pull out and extract someone's past wrongs when they haven't even been laid to rest. I know there was a lot of videos talking about what George Floyd did and all that. I don't know that man's heart. I know he was on drugs when everything went down, all that stuff. But listen, let the family mourn and bury their loved one, regardless of what he did. He had children. He was loved, and I don't think putting out videos condemning his past was a good thing. Truth is one thing, but tact and timing are needed as well. So I wanted to put that out there. But with that being said, are we being hunted? Let me drop some stats. And look, I know a lot of times, and I'm just going to be honest here. We're bold with it. Talking to people about these things is very difficult when there's an emotional state, because they don't want to hear facts. But feelings are fleeting, facts are final. So at some point we have to look at the facts. So at this point, it's time we start looking at the facts and start dismantling a narrative that is just not true, at least now. So the idea is that we are being hunted. And I can't remember the attorney's name. He represented the Floyd family. Do you remember?
Yeah, there are two actually.
Yeah.
Two or three attorneys.
Yeah. One of them, he's the most famous. I think his name was Ben. Oh gosh, I had it written down in my notes in preparation. My apologies for that. But basically, he basically said that this is an example of genocide that's happening against Black people. That Black cops are committing. Police officers are committing genocide against Black people. That was his statement. So I wanted to just shed some light on that. I'm going to share some numbers with you guys, because numbers don't lie, about that narrative, and just boldly declare that it is false. We are not being hunted. We are not being systematically killed by police officers. It is very far from the truth.
Now, are you saying no one is? Or are you saying generally speaking?
I'm saying generally speaking.
Okay.
And when you see the numbers, it's pretty telling. So, and by the way, these numbers, these are gathered from the Washington Post, which is notoriously liberal in their approach to politics and everything. So this is Washington Post. Washington Post has been tracking numbers since 2015. Violence against all people from police officers. So in 2019, this is most recent numbers, there was a total of 1,002 people killed by police, which we don't want to see anyone killed by police. Of those who were killed, 802 had their race recorded. So the incidents where race was actually recorded, there's 802. Of those who were killed, 371 were white. Blacks, there was 236. So a total of 236 Black people were killed by police officers in 2019. Now, cases of unarmed Blacks. These are people who were unarmed. They were not in an aggressive stance against police. And this is Washington Post. There's a total of 10 Blacks who were killed, who were unarmed. Of those 10, there were 2 cases that we know of. Again, let's say that all of them did that, but based on what we know and what was reported, based on the body cams and what was available and the court rulings and the evidence that was presented, 2 showed, of those 10 incidents, showed questionable, negligent, or criminal action by police. 2 on both of those cases, charges were filed, and the police officers were or are in the process of being criminally charged. Okay, so that's 2 individuals. There's approximately 375 million police interactions every year. So, statistically speaking, for a black person to have 2 questionable deaths, again, no death is okay, but 2 interactions out of 375 million total police interactions, that resulted in death. I understand that brutality is something that is a concern as well, but I'm just looking at deaths. The idea that there is genocide happening, and this is a rhetoric that has been repeated several times in regards to the oppression of black people. 2. Now, in contrast, total police officers killed in 2019 as a result of felony charges. They were murdered by someone who had a gun. There was 48 officers killed. So the blacks killed by police as a percentage of population is 0.000002% of the black population, which is approximately 44 million in the United States of America. That is the percentage of blacks who are killed that are unarmed, that are questionable in the United States of America last year. 0.000002%. Police killed by criminals as a percentage of total police force. There's approximately 800,000 police in the United States of America. That is 0.006% of police officers that are killed. That means that police are 30 times more likely to be killed than a black man. And those are just straight numbers. So the narrative that the police are a viable threat to black America, and that we need to be telling our children that they could be killed by a police officer, is absolutely ridiculous, statistically speaking. And again, numbers don't lie, and these aren't numbers made up by some far right-wing person who just wants to skew the numbers. This is the Washington Post. This is a notoriously liberal and left-wing organization. Now, one of the things that you don't see in that, because I know there's a disproportionate number of whites to blacks being killed in proportion to the population, blacks being 13%. But again, this is a number that we have to deal with as a community, and that is this: that 50% of all crimes in the United States of America are committed by 13% of the population, and that is black people. 44% of all violent crimes and murders are committed by 6% of the population, and that is black men. And those are just the numbers. Now we can talk about why that is. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because it goes to the attack that Black Lives Matter is waging on a particular group or ideology or purpose in our nation. So the reality is that when they say that the police are a threat to black lives, that is actually one of the furthest things from the truth. That it's actually more likely for me to be killed by a black man, and from what I understand in the stats, it's 70 times more likely that I would be killed by a black man than I would be killed by a police officer, statistically speaking.
And that's the same white and black, by the way.
Yeah.
They're almost exactly the same. White on white crime, black on black crime.
Yes, absolutely. So the narrative that's being presented that blacks are under attack by the police is based on, I feel more than anything, again, our past. In the past, the police were used as a force to come against black people in that time in our history. Absolutely. But we're just not seeing that statistically right now. Is there police brutality? Yes. But is that a result of systematic racism? Is that a result of people intentionally putting white people in positions of authority so they can hunt down and kill black people, that the stats just don't say that. I watched a video, and it was a young girl. She was probably 10 or 11 years old, and the setup is that her father had just had a conversation with her about
I know exactly what you're talking about.
being black and the risk. And she's sitting there bawling her eyes out and saying, I could be killed because of the color of my skin. And the dad gives her a hug and is like, I'm so sorry, baby. I was so mad when I saw that. Because number one, that's bad parenting. That's just bad parenting. To instill fear into your child is wrong. I have a beautiful 17-year-old daughter. And I have to explain to her the risks of being a young woman in this world. Because you are a target. She's young, she's beautiful, and people will look at her as if she is a target. So I explained this to her, but I explained it to her in a way where she doesn't feel like a victim, but I've empowered her to have victory. I told this girl how to defend herself. I told her how to use a knife. I'm just going to be honest. My girl is packing a knife and a blade, and if you roll up on her, she knows where and how to cut you and make sure that you're not getting up. And I'm just serious. I do drills with her, the whole thing. So I explained to her the dangers, the real dangers, and then I empower her. To see a young girl crying when about being afraid of police when she's got 0.0000002% chance of being killed by a police officer, but she has a much greater risk from the African American down the street. It's just not the right narrative. It's just not true, or true enough to make that big of a statement, in my opinion. And I feel that narrative is very dangerous because it builds upon an already inherent mistrust of the police, which makes it difficult for the police to actually take out the criminals that are in the communities that are causing damage. Because the black community doesn't trust police, when they come through, they're not going to tell them anything. Snitches get stitches. Snitches get stitches. So there's a breakdown there, and we see more crime because the police aren't in good relationship in the community. So I want to get your response to that.
It's mixed, and this is challenging to speak about with people who haven't experienced this. But well, first of all, let me go to the statistics. I'm totally a statistics person too.
Yeah.
Sometimes to a fault. And statistics, you can go to Harvard, you can go to the FBI site, you can go to a few different sites that do statistics, and they'll tell you almost all statistics are about half of what the statistics are, and that statistics are developed over time, and so things like this, in this case, things have to be reported.
Yeah.
Things have to be recorded.
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, especially before there were cameras, let's talk about like the relationship between black people and police officers. It has been proven that since we've gotten cameras, aggression between police officers and civilians has gone down drastically because of cameras. Okay, so there was a reason before the cameras that was happening. Why is it changed now that there are cameras?
Yeah.
So my point is, I think it depends on where you live. There are some people, like in the neighborhoods, some of the neighborhoods I grew up in, lived in 2 different projects, and what people considered the hood, just because there were a lot of black people there, even though it was mixed. And there was a lot of crazy business between police officers, and I knew a lot of police officers, good ones, and the good ones knew bad ones, and I had interactions with bad ones, and I grew up with bad ones, and I grew up with my mother, who also, she was sexually assaulted by a police officer. You know, there are some people who have countless stories, and real life 2-day experiences. And so again, we're talking generally as a whole. We're looking at the numbers, but there are people who don't care about the numbers. They're like, this is my experience. And so I totally get that. I get their point of view, you
Yeah.
know. But as far as you said, why people think, facts versus truth. You said facts are facts. I'm not gonna butt that either. I'll say also you can say factually, it's a fact that for example, it was a fact I had cancer at one time.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, I actually got supernaturally healed of cancer. The fact was I had cancer, but the truth is I'm healed, and I was and I am. So I know these are facts, and I know these are the numbers, and I know the numbers will never be completely accurate.
Right.
But I also know there are people who are living in communities
Yeah.
where there is a lot of corruption,
Yeah.
and there are systems in place. I have family and friends who are in governmental and have been in governmental positions and knew the inner workings and know the inner workings of these things. And there are places where there's just outright corruption and a target against certain communities or people. And oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name of. It's called. There's a documentary about Minnesota about the whole redlining thing and covenants.
Yeah.
You know, writing the covenants in the deeds of property.
Yes.
And those things are still going on. So I love statistics, as I mentioned. I get statistics, and they are facts. And then there are also people who are living different realities than these statistics.
Yes.
And those are the people that I feel for.
Yes.
And I have to personally, I have to find that balance. Look, I'm a child of God. I'm free. I'm not like that stated. I am free from this oppression, and I'm free from systemic racism. But I do still find myself in those situations.
Yeah.
So what do you say to not the whole, but what do you say to the people who are daily, and this is happening, dealing with these things?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point, and I want to address something real quick. I want to answer that, but I think that the importance of looking at things from a bigger picture is so that we can debunk a narrative.
Yeah.
Because the narrative that Black Lives Matter is pushing when they're talking about these things, it is making it seem like this is the normative and it is everywhere, when statistically speaking it is not.
Yes.
If
true.
we were specific with the narrative, then I would feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But we're being
general
in a very big way.
True that.
So I think that that's the problem, is that they're generalizing and saying this is the biggest problem. And I understand stats could be off, but let's multiply that by 30 times.
Yeah.
That's still 0.006%.
Right.
Which, again, 48 is still a lot.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot different from 2.
Yeah.
And 0.0, so that means if the stats were 30 times off, it's still not a lot. It's still not a lot. Now, it is a lot for those individuals who lost someone, regardless of circumstances. It is. So it's the balance between seeing the person and then the principles.
Because those stats are many of those stats come from certain places only. They're the addition. They're the they add up to that number, but they may be in
disproportionate in areas and
exactly.
in locale.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so it can be the absolute truth that 0.0002% could be in just 10 different places in the United States.
Right.
But to them it's 100%.
Right. But when you're looking at 10 people within the United States, even if 10 people were in one community, I mean, yes, that would be devastating, and that would be a problem. But no, again, numbers wise, and I hate reducing human beings just to numbers, but we have to have both. Otherwise, we can get out of hand with narratives. So again, addressing that, it's to the individuals who are in that situation where this is your reality. Then I say, let's go there and let's make the necessary changes. Now, with that said, one of the realities that we also have to deal with, just as a black community, is the disproportionate crime rate. There absolutely is a disproportionate crime rate in the black community. And where that stems from is the absence of the nuclear family in the homes.
Proven spiritually and naturally.
Naturally and spiritually. This is proven. So I want to address the attack on heterosexual mindset, the attack on the nuclear family, and the attack on the cisgender, those who are straight. Here's some interesting stats. So first of all, if you see these numbers here on the left, the graph demonstrates the number of households by percentage living with mother only. So in other words, these are fatherless homes broken down by community. So the red representing the white families, the black is in the blue, and Hispanic is in the green. So you see in the 1960s, there's about 19% single mother households within the black community, 6% within the white community. Then all of a sudden, there's this massive jump from the 60s to the 70s and then onwards to the 90s. And there were some distinct government decisions that led to that. You see that jump there. It literally almost flips upside down from 1960s to the year 2000. And actually, these numbers aren't completely consistent with two other sources. This was just the nicest graph. Most of them say it's upwards of 60% now fatherless homes.
Wow.
For the black community, 20% in the white community, and the Hispanic community rests right around 26%.
Wow.
It's also interesting that the black community has the highest number of fatherless homes, and also the highest level of crime. If you look to the diagram on the right, this is from the Fatherhood Institute. There's just some simple stats there, and these are truth. There's a 4-time greater risk of poverty without a father in the home, 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen. You're more likely to have behavioral problems, more likely to face abuse and neglect. If the father's not in the house, the protector is gone, so there's abuse and neglect that happens. There are 2 times greater risk of infant mortality. You're more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, more likely to go to prison, way more likely. They didn't even put the numbers on there because it's so discouraging.
Oh, wow.
To go to prison, 2 times more likely to suffer obesity. You're more likely to commit a crime, and 2 times more likely to drop out of high school.
My goodness.
So, the thing that's troubling Black America more than anything is fatherlessness. And the thing that Black Lives Matter is fighting against is fathers in the home. They don't want the nuclear family. They don't want heterosexual relationships. They don't want the patriarchy, which offers protection and provision. And it's proven in the stats. It's proven in the stats. When the father's not in the home, there's 4 times more likely to be poverty, and there's more neglect, there's more abuse. Why? Because the father isn't there to do his job.
And didn't you say at some time that's even if they're not a father that's present?
Yeah.
Present here, but they're present physically.
Even if they're just physically present, it's better. Now that's not including where the father is being abusive in the home or there's something like that going on.
But if they're in there providing. If they're
in there providing in some way, they're just present. You have stronger families. Now, you know what happened in 1960, 1966? LBJ came in and he came up with the Great Society.
What is that? I don't know that.
The Great Society was his advancements in welfare to help disenfranchised communities, particularly the Black community. So he came in with the Great Society and they reformed welfare and they started giving more aid to Black people. Now, this is what happened. And to the Black community, I want you to listen to this and listen. I'm not a hater. I'm not a traitor. I'm not anything like that. I'm just somebody who reads and looks at history. When the Great Society came in and they started giving free money to the Black community with this condition: we'll give you the money, but if there's a male in the house, we won't give it to you. The condition for receiving the welfare was that there wasn't a man in the house So now we just incentivized fatherlessness. And then you see a huge increase in fatherlessness in the homes, far beyond in the black community than any other section of our nation.
What a setup.
And then you see all this crime start to happen. There's a direct correlation to the implementation of the Great Society, the buyout, and yes, I am saying buyout, of the black community, and fatherlessness. And you know what else increased? And I'm going to get political on you all because this is the bridge, this isn't church. There is a dramatic increase, a transfer from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party during that time. Everybody talks about the Great Shift. Most of the abolitionists, the first 23 black people in Congress, Republicans. But there was this great shift. What shifted them over? A wonderful manipulation tactic called dependency. When you create dependency, you create a new slavery. So the very party that's been perpetuating these things, I mean, think about it. Which party perpetuates homosexuality? Which party is championing the ability for little girls to go in and get an abortion without consulting mom and dad? Which party is defending or moving towards children being able to vote at a younger age? Why? Because they're easily manipulated. I mean, I'm trying not to get political with this, but it's not about politics. It's about morality and right and wrong,
Principles.
and who's enforcing or fighting for principles that are in alignment with the Word of God, and who's enforcing principles that are not in alignment with it. The Democratic Party came in and did all these things, and now the black community is dependent on them. And did you know that the black community has the biggest gap in terms, not the biggest gap, but the biggest loyalty in terms of a political party? When you talk about whites, Asians, Hispanics, or even by religion, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, affiliations or identifications with the LGBTQ community and all that, blacks have the biggest loyalty number. Nearly 90% belong to the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I always thought, why is that? And I think it's for two reasons. Number one, there's such a strong community when there's great oppression.
When there's great what?
Oppression. When you've been oppressed, you come together as a tight-knit community and you look out for one another. I think that's one of the things that you see in the black community is that we really are good at sticking together and fighting for one another. Even if someone's done wrong, we fight for each other because, like, look, we got to look out for one another because there's been such great oppression. So that has been built into the community, and that is such a powerful force. But I think the other thing that we see is that there was, I feel, a direct, systematic, intentional enslavement, re-enslavement, not physically, but socially and mentally, creating a dependency, removing the fathers from the home. I mean, one of the things that you have to do if you're going to set up a communist nation is you have to remove God, the Father.
Right.
So you can control the people.
Yeah.
How do you control the people? Remove the father from the household. That's one of the things that we see. And I know I'm probably going to take heat from this, but I'm just, when I was a kid, I like playing connect the dots. I'm just connecting dots here. You see a direct correlation with these things.
So today is a really great segue to next week, since you're talking about systemic things.
Yes.
So, don't answer this if it's too much getting into next week. But you said these things are created. These things are created. So, do you think part of this is a system that was created with the intent of, or this system is created? Oops, this happened.
Oh no, this is intentional. However, it's not with the purpose and the intent that people think. It's not with the system and the intent that people think. It goes much deeper than the simply political intentions. This is
Agreed.
This is demonic, and I think people are going to be very surprised next week when I connect the dots again, and you see what the system really is that's creating racism. The real system that's targeting African Americans, and not just African Americans, but I'm going to highlight that it's in our schools, it's in our government, it is everywhere, and it is so much deeper than what they're allowing you to see. They want you to think it's systematic at this level because it's a complete diversion from what's really going on over at this level. So I'm really excited to talk about systemic racism next week. I hope it will be as eye-opening for those who watch as it was for me when I started looking into the numbers. So,
Yeah, it's deep.
yeah.
How much time do we have left?
I don't know. We're just going.
Okay.
It is time now.
To stop?
It is time now to stop.
Okay.
It is 9:33.
We didn't get everybody's questions.
No, we didn't. Let me see. Well, actually, it looked like everybody was just enjoying it because there wasn't a whole lot more. So what we'll do is I'll kind of go on and I'll create a couple videos and I'll answer these next couple questions just in response for you guys, so you do get your answers. But it is time to go. It has been 2 hours of wonderful conversation. So I want to thank our guest Kimberly Arland for coming on and bringing your perspective. It was so wonderful. Of course, and we got to have you back again. I think everybody really enjoyed it, and I want to thank you guys again for watching, for participating through your questions, and allowing us to be in your homes tonight. So from us to you, we want to say God bless you. Thank you for watching The Bridge. And until I see you again, keep it bold, keep it balanced, and keep it biblical. Love you guys. Be well.